What do you get when you put Jackie, the joke man, modeling, and Peter Bales on a show called More Stand-Up Memories? You get this. Funny memories, funny stories, comedians and jokes you've seen before. So stay a while and laugh with us at least until you're bored.
Welcome.
Stay tuned until you're bored. Is that what he said?
Yeah, that's a great intro. Thanks for. And the irony of our subject after that new intro.
Jesus.
Stay tuned, everybody, until you're bored.
Oh, God.
Welcome to Stand Up Memories. Jackie is on good behavior tonight because of the gravitas of our guest, a wonderful guest.
And also due to my respect for you.
Out of your respect for me.
Yeah.
I will believe that when I see
This
it.
is my new leaf. I absolutely respect Peter Bales, the professor.
I'm Peter Bales. This
my
is
partner.
Jackie the Joke
Even
Man.
though he's not that funny.
All right.
And he looks older than me.
All right.
Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce our guest. He's got a terrific book out, and it's now out in paperback. I'm going to hold up the hardcover. It's called In the Garden of the Righteous, and our guest is named Richard Hurowitz with a U, Hurowitz. This is an important book, and I'll just we'll bring him on. Get ready to bring him on, and he's up.
There he is.
There he is. All right, now Jackie and I had the chance. Richard, this is true. We went to a fairly small dinner party, and he was there speaking about his book. And very early on, you didn't see it. I leaned over to Jackie and I said, "We got to get this guy."
And you didn't even need to say it.
I didn't even need to say it.
it.
We got to get this guy. And this is listen, everybody, this is a comedy podcast, but we want to stretch ourselves and go a little bit outside the box. A lot of comedians watch this podcast, and comedians are intelligent people. And this is
for the most part, Peter.
And this is a wonderful and important book, In the Garden of the Righteous. And welcome, Richard Hurowitz, to our. You have raised the level here.
Thank you for having me.
In spite of yourself.
And,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
thank you.
the
Now
topic is very, very light.
Yes, but it's a very light topic. It's the Holocaust, and
be pretty hard pressed to find a heavier topic.
Yeah, you would. But I also can say this book is uplifting when you read it. And I Richard, can you explain why somebody would read your book and of course the subject matter is the Holocaust. How can you describe a book about the Holocaust as uplifting, but you've actually done it?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. And that was the intention. So it's a book about people who rescued Jews and others who were being hunted by the Nazis and at great risk to themselves, including some of whom died. So, but they were, they're probably, I think, among the most heroic stories in human history. They're very overlooked. Most of them are not well known. I opened the book with a guy named Aristides de Souza Mendes, who saved in 3 weeks in France about 10,000 people, including the people who wrote Curious George and a lot of other well-known people, but also a lot of just, people on the run, very desperate Jews that the Nazis were hunting. And no one's heard of him, right? And, this was such a rare thing. We always think about the Holocaust. Why did people do it? Why did people go along with it? Why did people collaborate? That was most people, but there were these very unusual kind of rare people like Oskar Schindler, from the movie, who did this. There were about 27,000 people have been recognized for this, which if you filled up Madison Square Garden with a representative sample of people at the time, seats about 20,000 people, you'd have one person. So they were just extremely rare. And to me, they shouldn't be lost to history, but they're also extremely inspiring, as you mentioned, and they're really amazing stories.
Well,
They
it's a
are-
really frightening prospect to help, right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
instant death for anybody even caught looking that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were in places like Poland, if they caught you, they not only killed you, they killed your entire family, including your children. So yeah, it was very heroic and very, very dangerous.
Wow.
There are 10 chapters. And, I was going through my head how I was going to describe it. What I'm not going to say, because I said it in my car and I said to myself, you idiot. Well, there are 10 vignettes. No, they're not vignettes. That's an inappropriate word. 10 inspiring stories. Each gets a chapter of people who did the right thing, who helped. And to make this list, there were certain parameters, not the least of which was you had to be a non-Jew. Is that correct?
Yes, I only wanted to talk about people who were not Jewish because I was particularly interested again in people who like helped people who were different than themselves, right? And so, that was one of the criteria I set out was that there had to be non-Jewish. So
Are the amount of people that help, they help the Jews get away from the Holocaust? What percentage of the helpers were non-Jewish? Like 5%, half, tiny?
Oh, I think the vast majority of people who helped were not Jewish. Yeah,
because they could do stuff that Jews couldn't.
Yeah. I mean, the Jews were basically underground. So and even in places where there was an organized Jewish effort, all of a sudden it became they themselves were in jeopardy. So like that's the story about the Italian cyclists in Italy. There were a lot of Italian Jews helping, and it was when they had to go into hiding, the Catholic Church took over and basically hid Jews.
Wow.
I love that in the book you're wondering about why so few do the right thing, and that leads the reader to think about what would I do.
Yeah.
And you're not my therapist, but thank you for coming on the show. You wonder about yourself when you're reading about this
That
book.
is always so frightening,
It
thinking
is.
about situations.
Yeah.
Whether you'd run into the burning building. You know what I mean? Like to save somebody or.
And you think about Hannah Arendt, and I know you know about the banality of evil. And what you bring up in this book, does it work for the same thing about the banality of goodness? Because these are regular people who stepped up.
Yeah.
Were they exceptional or were they?
Well, this is like a really good question, and I'm very interested, like to try to figure out why did some people do this. I have various theories. I mean, to me, the single biggest thing was definitely seems to have been the impact that your parents have on you in your early childhood. But two things. One is telling, a lot of them had parents who told them, we shouldn't be bigoted and we should help other people. But a lot of them also came out of like really loving homes, which gave them a great sense of self-esteem and the ability to kind of keep their moral compass when the rest of the world was falling apart. But I think to your question, like most of the people in the book were ordinary people.
Okay.
I mean, some of them were quite extraordinary in the sense that they achieved things totally unrelated to this. Like I tell the story of Gino Bartoli, who won the Tour de France, or there was one of the great circus, performers, but they were not people who set out, with a couple of exceptions, to do like help other people. They were really just found themselves in really difficult circumstances. And I actually, as part of the process of researching the book, I ended up talking to a lot of their children, which was really fascinating, right? Because your children give you like a real insight, into this. And like, like my kids, like, I said, oh, I'm going on more stand-up memories. And they're like, you're not funny. Don't try to be funny. Don't try to be funny with Jackie.
A lot of comedians.
This was my nephew actually literally said, don't even try. So your kids know you better than anyone. And so when I interviewed them, like, there's one guy, Hiram. I like to say the names of the people because I think they deserve to be known. So the Hiram Bingham, who was an American diplomat who saved a lot of the great artists and writers. He, his kids, I interviewed, he had 11 children. I interviewed 3 of them. They view him as like a saint. The person he worked with is a guy named Varian Fry, who's one of 5 Americans who rescued Hannah Arendt, among other people who you just mentioned. I spoke to his son, and his son was like, he's kind of violent. He was like, very volatile, bipolar, not a great father. Didn't really like him very much. Actually said to me he thought it was like, some of his bipolar ability was part of the reason why he was able to do this. And I even interviewed the daughter of a pastor and his wife, who were quite famous in the nonviolent movement. And they were in a town called Le Chambon, where actually Timothy Chalamet's grandfather was from as well. And they saved about 5,000 people, 3,500 children. They were nonviolent people. They were like these, they were really do-gooders. But I spoke to their daughter, who was 95, and she was telling me how wonderful they were. And I said, well, what were they like as parents? And, did they go to your piano recital? She said, no. Oh, they would never have come to my piano recital. They were way too busy for that, but she was still upset about it. Right?
Wow.
So, these were, I found this very hopeful. There were Aristides Sousa Mendes, who I mentioned, he had an illegitimate child. Okay. These were not perfect people. Okay. Like I like to say, you don't have to be a saint to be a hero, but what they were people who were like Jackie was saying, they literally faced probably the worst moment in human history. They faced these stark moral choices. Everyone else was doing the wrong thing, and they rose to the occasion. They did the right thing. And so to me, they kind of redeemed our hope in humanity, because, if they didn't exist, then we know how really terrible people are and will be. But because there were still these people, but they really just, they were very, a lot of them were very ordinary. By the way, education had very little correlation. Doesn't mean it's not important, but every member every person at the Wannsee conference, where the Nazis met in a villa outside of Berlin to decide to murder 6 million Jews, every one of them had a law degree or a PhD. The guy who rescued Primo Levi out of Auschwitz, Lorenzo Peroni, was basically functionally illiterate. So there was really no correlation between education and how people behaved.
But there was a correlation for the people who did the right thing coming from loving homes.
Yes.
That's amazing. But actually it makes sense.
It makes total sense.
It makes total sense.
It,
but still, figuring out why these people did the right thing. This is a book, by the way. When I read it, almost when you turn the page, you're be careful. It's almost every page. Be careful. It's that kind of a book.
that almost should be the name of the book.
Yeah, well, be careful. As I say, 10 stories. I went straight to, because I'm totally into American history, of course. I went straight to the chapter that talked about U.S. inaction.
Yeah.
And I'm actually stumbling here because it gets emotional for me. I love my country, but we could have done better.
We fall short here.
We fell short. I think when we met first, my idol, my historical idol, and if you're a historian, you shouldn't have idols. You should try to be objective. But Franklin Roosevelt, I will say this, and he was the worst enemy Hitler ever had. But we could have done more. We could have done more sooner.
Right.
And it makes you think. This book, and I'll say the title again, In the Garden of the Righteous. That's a great title, because the focus is on the righteous. And in your introduction and in your conclusion, you're asking the reader to think about why, how, who did this. Most people didn't. And ultimately you come away going, well, what would I have done? Absolutely terrific. But you read it and you just go, be careful, be careful. I just saw Nuremberg. Again, I've seen it twice. The film. Have you seen the film?
I haven't. I'm going to see it, but I've not seen it. But I had a cousin who was at the Nuremberg trials who interrogated Goering. So I'm really,
Cousin?
yeah.
Wow.
Who? Okay. Well, I
Did you
think
like it?
I did like it, and I think
I heard Russell Crowe was pretty amazing as Goering.
he was pretty amazing. He played Goring. Did you see Nuremberg yet?
No,
Okay.
no.
Everybody out there, see the film, read this book. In many ways, they go together because there's just following orders, and people wondering, could it happen again? We have to have this trial. We can't just hang them. We have to start talking about international law, which barely existed before the Nuremberg trial. That film, I'm glad it's out there because, you say never forget, but never forget really means never forget. That's why this book is so important. I also, parents out there, this is the sort of a book you buy and you leave it where your kids can find it, because it's terrific. And you can't do comedy about the Holocaust, but irony, hiding Jews in a zoo.
Yeah.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about that? I mean,
Well, there's two stories. The one that you're talking about is the zoo was that I tell that story in the introduction. I refer to it, but I that was a movie as well. The circus was the one that I
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, they're two well-known stories. Yeah. The circus was it was a wild story. The circus was a very multicultural. When you go to the circus and they're like, this it's a family business, right? The seventh generation of the flying whatever,
Blended,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And so there were a lot of Jews in the circus, and there were also a lot of different cultures, and there were Jewish circuses, and the Nazis started to go after the Jewish circuses in the 30s, and they wanted to drive them out of business. And one of the things they did, actually, I mean, they in the end, a lot of Jewish circus owners were sent to Auschwitz, but they also would, which is also important to understand, like what was going on. Like there were people, the non-Jewish circus owners would take advantage, and they would, they'd drive a circus into bankruptcy and then buy it out for nothing. But there was a family called the Altoffs who did not do that. They were very heroic, and the guy Adolf Altoff and his wife Maria were like in their late 20s. He was from like basically circus royalty. And they had a traveling circus that went all over Germany. And I mean, this is a guy who like trained a tiger to ride a horse, and the tiger bit him, and he like continued performing. And if you remember in the 80s, the Ringling Brothers, you remember the lion tamer Gunter Gable Williams?
Gunter Gable Williams.
Yeah.
This guy taught him how to tame lions.
Okay.
So he was like a really well-known circus owner, and he was the ringmaster. And one day, like a family friend of his who was Jewish, an 18-year-old girl, knocked on his door, and she could no longer work because the circus, they could no longer hire Jews, and they were basically on the run. And she asked if he could hide her. And what he ended up doing was he put her in the circus under an assumed name. So she performed as basically an acrobat. And then her sister joined them, and her parents. She ended up marrying one of the clowns, and they had 2 children. And so you ended up with 6 people like in the circus being hidden, and the circus is traveling all over Germany. And every place it comes to, the Gestapo would come in and would inspect it. And he would tell them, they would go tell them, like, go hide, to the Jews in the circus. And then he would tell them stories about like dancing bears in Russia. And they actually always complimented him how neat his circus was, because the Gestapo loved things tidy. But he would do this sort of like song and dance routine, like entertaining them. And then they would go sit in the circus and watch. They had no idea there were Jews in the circus. And actually the biggest risk to any rescue we were talking about was denunciation, because people would regularly do this. They would go tell, turn people in. And he had a moment where there was somebody who worked for him who said, he said basically like, I think you're hiding Jews in the circus, and he basically told the guy like, get out, and fired him, which was very dangerous. But the guy ended up, not sort of got scared, and so this was a successful rescue.
Wow.
Everyone survived, and then he went on after to continue to like work, train and perform in the circus. But to me, it was a wild image of, again, like this big top circus all over Germany while the Nazis are in the audience, have no idea what's going on.
That's, that the fear, it only takes one person to turn on, that's so precarious, every second is, well, I guess every second is precarious no matter what. But my God,
And some of these rescues went on for years, and at any time that was the danger.
One leak, one small leak, one note or something,
Anything.
White Rose.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have happened. The papers flying up, and right, that you talk about right in the beginning of the book. And was it the custodian or who turned them in?
Yeah, that was the story of the White Rose was the story that originally got me interested in this, which is German medical students trying to stage an uprising, and they had circulated leaflets all over Germany trying to encourage people to rise up against Hitler. And I went on for a year, and then one day they were handing leaflets out in the University of Munich, and a maintenance man saw it and locked the door and called the Gestapo. And within minutes, they were arrested, and then they were on trial, and then they were dead.
Jesus.
And, it was like literally, they were able to successfully. This was something that was driving Hitler personally crazy, and it was known outside of Germany. Thomas Mann broadcast about it, and
because they didn't know where it was coming from.
They had no idea. They were kids. The reason it's the White Rose, that was the name of they signed their leaflets with that they were circulating, and then they were successfully like trying to resist, and then it just took like 3 minutes, and that was it.
And it was over. It was just done. I mean, no second chances. You're done. 10 chapters, and each one of them is new and different and inspiring, but each one gets you to the edge of your seat. And I'm sure you've been asked this, so I'm going to throw you a pitch right down Broadway for you to hit. Is it tough for you to pick what's coming, your favorite, not your favorite, but the one that impacted you the most?
Well, those are two different questions, right? Because I think, you're not. It's like asking you which of your children is your favorite, but I think
I know parents who would answer that.
I have two, and they love them exactly the same.
Good answer, Dan.
I think. Look, I think there's two that really stand out to me. For one, you said is which is the most impactful, and to me, that's the guy that I mentioned earlier, Aristides de Souza Mendes, who, he saved these 10,000 people, and that story. I opened the book with it, and the Christian Science Monitor actually called him the breakout star of the book, but because he would, just to give you the short version of it, he gave visas to a lot of people under disobeying the orders of the Portuguese government and Salazar, who was the dictator, and literally saved. He is believed to be the largest single rescue of by anybody during the Holocaust, by an individual. At least 10,000 people, and mostly in 3 weeks in June of 1940, when France fell. And again, some of it was famous people like the Salvador Dali, the people who wrote Curious George, the Rothschilds, the Habsburgs, but it was a lot of just very, very like poor people running. And the scenes were terrible because like the people were fleeing Paris, and the planes were overhead, like shooting machine guns. People saw their families killed. It was horrible. And then right after the surrender of the French, he was summoned back to Lisbon, and basically Salazar destroyed his life. And, he had been an aristocrat. He'd been from a wealthy family, and he went through his entire life savings. His children couldn't get jobs in Portugal. They had to leave. And then he sort of his wife died. He had a stroke. He died very prematurely, thinking and was basically punished for what he did. And he had this wonderful moment when all hell was breaking loose, and when he was in Bordeaux, and a rabbi with a lot of young children had showed up at his consulate, and he asked for visas, and Susan Mendes offered him a visa, and the guy said, I couldn't take a visa just for myself. What about all the other refugees? And he took to his bed, and then he had what he described as a nervous breakdown, and then he got up and he said, I would rather stand with God against man than with man against God. And then he proceeded to give everybody, he made the announcement, I'm going to give everybody a visa regardless of who you are, knowing at that time, that he was basically destroying his career. So there's something extremely magnificent about this man. I hope if people have the opportunity to read the book. I wrote an article about him for the New York Times that went totally viral. And he's like that's the most powerful to me. The one that I would say was my favorite is Gino Bartoli, because it's such a crazy story, and I love Italy. And he won the Tour de France in 1938. He was not a fan of Mussolini, who was the dictator, but sports were really important to Mussolini. The Italians had won the World Cup and the Olympics, and they had Primo Carnero as heavyweight champion of the world. It drove him crazy that Bartoli wasn't on side, but he, working as a messenger, like an underground curate, he literally put fake papers in his bicycle, and he bicycled all over the north of Italy, bringing false papers for Jews and for partisans who were fighting the fascists, who were hiding in the cloisters and in the monasteries. And he was so famous. He was probably the most famous athlete in Italy. And if he had been caught, he would have been executed. He was actually at one point interrogated. He was terrified. And then he never told anybody what he did.
But how did he get away going around visiting? Wasn't he a celebrity of sorts?
He was so famous. So they would pull him over, and he would say, don't touch the bike. It's perfectly calibrated for the tour, right? And then he would sometimes, there's one story where he went to a train, and they needed to move Jews from one train to the other. He walked in, and everyone mobbed him, right? It would be like if LeBron James walked in, and even the Nazis came over, and everyone wanted his autograph, and he created this big distraction. And then what's amazing about him is he came back after the war and won the Tour de France again in 1948. So
this is the beauty of live podcasting. We're getting a little distortion here, although the music coming out sounds pretty good. Let's see. Here we are.
Yeah, I think
Our producer, is that our producer? You are on the screen. Are we?
Yep, I think Richard is having some lag problems. Hold on, I'll see if we can bring him back, and you guys can close out the show.
This is Michael Zinn, our producer, everybody. And I have to tell you, this book is beyond terrific. And we're getting him back.
There he is.
There he is. We're getting you back, I hope.
Looks like he's locked up there.
This guy, Richard Hurowitz, he went to a small community college in New Haven called,
what's it called?
Yale University.
I knew I'd
Columbia Law School. He's a hedge fund guy, hugely successful, and then he spends his life now researching and writing about things that he's passionate about. And if you're not jealous of that, you should be. The paperback is out on In the Garden of the Righteous by Richard Hurowitz. This is the hardcover. It's published by Macmillan. And, Jackie and I wanted to go outside the box. This is a comedy podcast, but we wanted to.
But comedy is interesting, and Richard is frighteningly interesting.
Interesting
is
and real. I got to tell you, I thought of a joke about for us. The word Holocaust, the worst thing maybe to happen ever in human history, And
aside from your stand-up.
well, I was going to go. Jackie and I worked a week together in the Fort Lauderdale Comic Strip Comedy Club, and we have since referred to that week as a Holocaust mostly because of your behavior.
Thank you very much. In those days, it was a compliment.
Right. But this we've been talking about the real Holocaust. And as somebody who's taught social studies and history, you wonder, did I teach it well? Do I do
there's
enough?
certain things you cannot wrap your head around. Of course, your whole life, you know about the Holocaust. Even if you didn't study it, you knew enough about it. But when we went to Germany and actually went to Dachau,
I went to Dachau.
and when you actually walk out onto that field and walk into those barracks and go and stand in front of the oven, it's so beyond anything you could ever read or imagine or think about. It really shakes you to your boots,
Dachau was where they trained the crews to work the ovens and the extermination camps. And I was there chaperoning a school trip, if you can believe that. And one of the reactions some of the kids had, sometimes nervousness causes you to laugh. You're not laughing like you're laughing at a joke, but that can be a nervous reaction.
I totally get that.
Well, yeah, your audiences often are laughing.
The thing that freaked us out the most was, there's Dachau and there's Auschwitz. And growing up without knowing anything, I thought that were those two, maybe there were 4 or 5 of these places. And you go in to the building that houses the information, and there's a map of Germany and Poland. And there are so many.
They're all over the place.
So many.
Yeah.
I'm like, I had no idea in a million years,
It's something, never forget. Something makes you think. This book will send you Googling to find out more about things. From this show, I would say, hey, go see Nuremberg. This is a subject that's not going to go away in popular culture. This book is for a general audience, a smart general audience, but still a general audience. And it's just out in paperback. And the hardcover is published by Macmillan in the Garden of the Righteous.
And I would say, after this podcast, go and read that book, do a little bit of research if you dare, and send us some questions and send us some ideas. And I would say, let's have Richard on again, and let's
Absolutely.
go a little deeper.
Absolutely. We'll go deeper. All right. We've got a deal. Yeah. Sorry. He lost his internet there, but I assume our producer, Michael, is right there. Are we good?
Yeah, he's not going to come back. I think he's out. So
okay. Because
let's roll the show. Let's roll the credits.
Well, let's just again, Richard.
Peter, thank you
Richard
very much
Hurowitz.
for an excellent show.
This, Jackie and I, outside the box, I feel really good about it, talking about an important topic.
Excellente.
And thank you to our loyal audience for coming along for the ride.
We'll see you next show.
We will.